I remember the smell before I remember the words. That sour mix of old bleach and something burnt, like toast left too long, trapped in a kitchen that had forgotten how to open a window. The apartment seemed to breathe through the cracks, thin little sighs of winter air that slipped under the door and crawled across the floor to my bare feet. I was standing on the tile, holding my breath, counting the tiny squares the way kids count stars, hoping more would appear if I stared hard enough. "Please, stop," I whispered, but my whisper had no legs. It didn't cross the room. It didn't climb the counter or reach the woman pacing between the sink and the stove. She wasn't my mother. She had a name that sounded soft in photographs, Darlene, but it landed hard in real life, like a pot slammed face down on metal. I said eat, she snapped, dropping the plate so it chattered on the table. Beige noodles, cold and gummy, clung together like a fist. "You think I make food so you can just look at it?" My stomach tightened. The fork shook in my hand, a tiny silver bird that didn't know where to fly. "I can't," I said, my voice smaller than the hum of the refrigerator. "I can't stand it anymore." The air in the kitchen grew heavy, full of the slow storm that comes right before you know you should run, but you also know there's nowhere to go. Darlene leaned closer. The overhead light caught the shine on her nails, 10 little knives painted cherry red. "You can't?" She laughed without smiling. "Then don't eat. But don't you dare cry about it." And just like that, my eyes made a liar out of me. The tears rose before I could hold them back, fat and hot, blurring the fork, the plate, the world. I blinked them away and, for a second, saw myself the way I imagined other people might, thin, pale, hair pulled tight like it was trying to keep me together. 8 years old and somehow already older than the apartment, older than the peeling wallpaper with tiny blue flowers that had lost their petals to time. "Chega." I heard myself blurt, the word from the TV neighbors always left loud, a word that meant enough, in a language that felt brave in my mouth. "I can't take it anymore." The sentence bounced off the cabinets and fell to the linoleum like a glass that didn't break, just kept rolling until it found a corner. Darlene's face closed down. She reached for the plate, lifted it an inch, and set it back down with a careful, dangerous grace. "Say that again," she said. I swallowed. My throat was a knot tied by hands that didn't like me. I didn't repeat it. I didn't breathe. I wished for a sound, any sound, that wasn't her voice. A car door. A train whistle. The laugh of the woman across the hall who smelled like oranges and wore her hair in a cloud. Something to prove the world outside still existed. Instead, the apartment answered with the slow tick of the kitchen clock, the drag of socks on linoleum, the faint thud of a TV 2 floors down, ghosts living better than we did. The hallway beyond our door stretched thin and empty. Nights in this building were like that, thin and empty, unless payday was close and music spilled from someone's window with the kind of joy that made me pretend we were invited. "Clean that," Darlene said finally, pointing at my tears as if they were crumbs. "And don't let me hear another word." The faucet shuddered and spat. I cupped water into my mouth, cold, metallic, trying to rinse the ache away. My reflection in the streaked chrome looked like a stranger who knew all my secrets. When the knock came, it wasn't a knock. It was authority, 3 times, even, deliberate. The kind that makes you straighten your back even if no one ever taught you. Darlene froze. The faucet squeaked off. She wiped her hands on a towel and gave me a look that meant, "Don't." I didn't know what "don't" was yet, but I knew it had many shapes. Don't move. Don't make noise. Don't exist too loudly. Who is it? Darlene called, voice sweetened like tea with too much sugar. The hallway swallowed the answer. All I caught was a rumble, deep, adult, not from our floor. Darlene cracked the door. A slice of light from the hall drew a thin gold line across the kitchen tiles, like a road someone had forgotten to map. For one single heartbeat, the air smelled different, cooler, realer, touched by the city night and all its uncountable lives. "Wrong door," she said quickly, ready to push it closed. "I don't think so," a man's voice replied, and it traveled past Darlene's shoulder as if doors were opinions to be considered, not rules to be obeyed. I heard a child. Silence. The neighborhood kind, heavy but not empty, like the city had leaned in to listen. "There's no child here," Darlene said, soft and fast. "Good night." I didn't plan to move. I didn't plan to speak. But courage is a strange animal, it sometimes crawls out when you're certain you've shut every door to it. I took one step, then another. My toes felt the seam between two tiles like a border crossing. The gold line from the hallway touched my shin and climbed to my knee, a ribbon of knot night that made the room look staged, like I was in a photograph someone would find years from now and wonder why no one helped. "I'm here," I said. Just that. And the word didn't fall this time. It flew, somehow, with wings I didn't give it. Darlene flinched. The door opened wider, as if my voice had a hand of its own. "He wasn't what you think when you hear the word a millionaire. No tuxedo. No glittering watch. A long coat, dark and simple, rain still glittering on the shoulders, hair with a little wind in it, eyes that had learned to see for a living. He looked like the city had tried to teach him to hurry and he had refused. He smelled faintly of cold night air and something clean, like a new book when you first lift the cover. "What's your name?" he asked me, not her. My mouth formed an answer without consulting the part of me that usually hides. "Lena," I said. In my chest, my heart took a big step forward. "Lena," he repeated, as if he needed to test how my name felt in someone else's care. He shifted his gaze to Darlene. "May I come in?" "It's late," she said. "My husband is gone," he cut in, as if the hallway had given up its gossip. "And you've had a difficult evening." For a breath, I thought I saw it, the tiniest tremor in Darlene's jaw, a truth trying to escape. But she smoothed it away and stepped aside an inch, no more. He didn't move. He didn't need to. His presence filled the doorway like a promise you keep even if it hurts. "Lena," he said again, gentle now, all thunder stored away for later. "Do you need help?" There are 100 ways to say yes. I could have nodded. I could have cried. I could have reached for the stranger's sleeve like it was the rope tied to a boat leaving the worst island in the world. But I did none of those things. I did something smaller. I lifted the plate from the table and held it out with both hands. The noodles shivered. "I can't eat this anymore," I said. "I can't. I can't stand it." He didn't look at the food. He looked at my hands, the way I held the plate like it might explode, the way my fingers had gone white around the rim. He nodded once, slow, like he understood a code other people missed. Then he raised his voice, not to me, not even to Darlene, but to the apartment itself, to the building, to every lock and hinge that had ever tried to keep a child quiet. "Enough," he shouted, and the words seemed to move down the hall, up the stairwell, through the wiring and the pipes and every hidden place. "This stops now." Darlene started to speak, but the sound broke before it became a sentence. The man took a breath, and even his breath felt like something you could stand inside and rest. "Lena," he said. Put the plate down. You're coming with me. Just for tonight. We're going to get some air. The city outside rustled, 1,000 lives turning over in their sleep. On another night, I might have asked where, or why, or how a stranger could make a place feel like a door finally opening. But this wasn't another night. This was the one where a voice had finally arrived that sounded like rescue. I set the plate back on the table. The noodles sagged, defeated. My feet found the floor like they trusted it again. And as I stepped toward the hall, the light, the cold, the unknown, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. The sense that the world might still have a space with my name on it. If you're hearing this and your heart tightened even a little, hold that feeling for a second. And if you believe every child deserves a door that opens, let me know, leave a comment, share this with someone who might listen. Because sometimes rescue starts with a voice that refuses to be quiet. The hallway felt colder than I remembered. My bare toes curled against the scuffed wood, trying to shrink from the draft sneaking through broken windows at the far end. The man's coat swayed as he walked ahead, not hurried but steady, like he had already decided where this night was going to lead. I followed because the air in that apartment had run out. Every breath in there felt borrowed, taxed by Darlene's voice, measured out like punishment. Out here, even with the walls damp and the lights buzzing, it was still air. And air, even cracked and heavy with dust, was better than poison. Behind me, Darlene's voice called out once. Just once. Lena. It didn't sound like a command this time. It sounded thinner. But I didn't turn. My legs had finally chosen sides. The man slowed so I could catch up. His shoes tapped soft rhythms against the floorboards. "Do you trust me, Lena?" he asked. Trust was a big word, bigger than the stairwell we stepped into, bigger than the city stretching beyond it. I wanted to answer yes, but my throat had been taught to ration its words. I gave a smaller truth, "I don't know yet." He smiled. It wasn't the smile of someone who needed to be believed. It was the smile of someone who understood that sometimes children are the best judges in the room. "Fair enough," he said. "Then let me earn it." The city outside hit me in the face like a wave. Neon and smoke. Cars hissing by. A bus exhaling at the corner. The hum of 100 apartments stacked on top of each other, each carrying its own story, some loud, some secret. I hadn't been outside at night in weeks. Maybe months. My skin drank the cold. He didn't take my hand at first. He let me choose. And after 3 steps, when the sidewalk seemed too wide and the dark too sharp, I reached up. His hand was rough, like someone who still fixed things himself, but warm, like the inside of a house that remembers you. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Someplace with light," he said. "Someplace that smells like food you'd actually want to eat." I thought of the noodles. My stomach turned. The hunger under it felt old, like a hole dug years ago. The diner was only 4 blocks away, but it might as well have been another country. Its windows glowed soft yellow. Inside, waitresses in aprons carried plates that smoked with warmth. The bell over the door jingled, and suddenly I wasn't invisible anymore. Heads turned. Not in cruelty, not in mockery, just in that small, human way people notice a child who doesn't belong. The man nodded to the woman behind the counter, who raised her eyebrows but said nothing. He guided me to a booth at the far end, away from the door, where the red leather seats squeaked as I slid across. "What do you like, Lena?" he asked. The question landed like a foreign language. Like he had asked me to name all the stars. I blinked. My throat squeezed out a whisper, I don't know. He nodded again, slow and patient. Then we'll start simple. Pancakes. With syrup. And a glass of milk. I watched him order. The waitress smiled at him the way people smile at someone who's been coming for years. Familiar, but curious. When she left, he leaned back. You don't have to eat if you don't want to. Just know you can. When the plate arrived, steam curled upward like gentle fingers. The pancakes were golden, stacked like treasure. My fork shook again, but not from fear this time. From disbelief. I cut a piece, dipped it in syrup, tasted warmth. It didn't fight me. It didn't sit like a stone. It melted. Sweet. Soft. Safe. The man watched, not greedy for thanks, just watchful, like someone making sure a candle didn't blow out. Why are you helping me? I asked finally, my voice muffled by syrup and suspicion. He looked out the window for a moment, where the city wore its tired face. Because once, a long time ago, someone should have helped me. And no one did. Silence again, but not the dangerous kind. This silence felt like a blanket heavy enough to warm, light enough to breathe through. Do you live alone? I asked. Yes, he said. He didn't decorate it with lies. But no one should have to be alone when they're 8 years old. I studied his face. Lines near his eyes, not from anger but from squinting against sunlight. A scar near his chin, thin like a pencil mark. His hair was dark with threads of gray, the kind that tells you someone has survived storms. Something inside me loosened. A knot that had been there for months, maybe years, slid open just a little. I didn't say thank you. I didn't need to. The fork in my hand and the syrup on my lips already said it for me. When the last bite was gone, the man leaned forward, elbows on the table. Lena, tonight you're not going back there. You'll stay somewhere safe. Tomorrow, we'll see what can be done. The word safe cracked something in me. Tears came fast, sudden, harder than before, but different. They weren't the kind that burned because no one cared. They were the kind that fell because someone finally did. He didn't reach to wipe them away. He just let them fall, respecting them the way you respect rain after a long drought. Remember this, he said gently. Pain isn't forever. And neither is fear. But courage stays if you feed it. I held on to that line the way kids hold onto lullabies. And for the first time in so long, I wanted the night to last forever. The diner lights faded behind us as we stepped back into the city night. My stomach, still warm with pancakes, felt like it had finally remembered what it was supposed to feel like, full, not heavy, alive, not punished. I kept close to the man, though. Out here, the streets were darker than I remembered. He led me down quieter blocks, away from the neon and buses, toward a part of the city where old brick buildings stood shoulder to shoulder, their windows glowing like tired eyes. At the corner, a stray cat darted across the sidewalk, its tail flicking like a question mark. Do you have a name? I asked suddenly. He looked down at me, almost surprised I hadn't asked before. Samuel, he said. The name fit him, solid, worn but steady, like a coat you could trust to keep out the cold. Samuel, I repeated, testing it on my tongue. Why were you there tonight? At my door. He breathed out slowly, his breath fogging in the air. I was visiting a tenant on the next floor. Heard your voice. It didn't sound right. It was strange, the idea that a stranger's ear could be more loyal than the people who were supposed to care for you. Stranger, too, that I hadn't been invisible to everyone after all. We turned onto a narrow street where the lampposts leaned as if they were listening. Samuel stopped in front of a building with a metal door painted green. He dug into his pocket for keys and pushed it open with a squeak. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and something else, books, maybe. A stairwell climbed upward, the walls painted cream but cracked at the edges. He led me to the second floor and unlocked another door. The apartment was simple. Wooden floors that creaked honestly. Shelves lined with books whose spines had been opened too many times. A couch with cushions that sagged a little but looked softer than any bed I had seen in months. "This is home," Samuel said. "Not fancy, but safe." I stepped in cautiously, toes testing the floorboards like they might vanish. The quiet here wasn't heavy like Darlene's apartment. It was the quiet of a place that let you breathe. Samuel set his coat on a hook and moved into the kitchen. "You'll sleep here tonight," he said, gesturing to the couch. "Tomorrow morning, we'll talk to someone who can help. Child services, maybe. But tonight, just rest." The word services didn't mean much to me. What meant something was the way he poured a glass of water without rushing, the way he set it in front of me like it wasn't a favor but a right. I curled up on the couch, hugging my knees, staring at the books stacked along the wall. Titles I couldn't read yet, but their presence comforted me. Words meant safety here, not shouting. Samuel sat in a chair nearby, not hovering, just keeping watch. "Do you want to talk, Lena?" he asked after a while. I shook my head. Talking felt dangerous, like giving away too much. He nodded, as if that was the right answer too. The night deepened. Outside, the city kept breathing, horns in the distance, footsteps in the alley, the hush of wind against the glass. My eyelids grew heavy, but sleep didn't come quietly. When it did, it brought the shadows. I dreamed of the kitchen again. The plate. The noodles. Darlene's voice cutting like broken glass. But this time, when I shouted enough, no one came. The door never opened. I was alone, the words falling back onto me like stones. I woke with a gasp, the blanket tangled around me. The room was dim, lit only by a lamp in the corner. Samuel was still there, dozing in his chair, a book resting on his lap. For a moment, I just watched him. His head tilted slightly, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that felt like a lullaby. It wasn't a house full of family, but it was enough to make the night less cruel. I slipped off the couch and padded quietly to the window. The city stretched beneath me, streets glowing faintly, buildings stacked like toy blocks. Somewhere down there, Darlene was probably pacing, furious. But she couldn't reach me here. Not tonight. Can't sleep. Samuel's voice was gentle, not startling. I turned. He rubbed his eyes, setting the book aside. "Bad dreams," I admitted. He nodded knowingly. "Dreams can't hurt you once you open your eyes, Lena. They only remind you of the pain you've already survived." I sat on the arm of the couch, hugging myself. Why do people hurt kids? The question came out raw, sharper than I expected. He leaned back, sighing. Because hurt people sometimes pass their hurt to others. And because the world isn't always fair about who gets power. But listen to me, Lena, none of that is your fault. The words settled into me slowly, like seeds. I didn't know if they'd grow yet, but I wanted them to. Silence stretched again, softer this time. Samuel reached for his coat pocket and pulled something out, a small, worn photograph. He handed it to me. A boy stared back. maybe 10 years old, dark hair, eyes that looked like mine in a way. He wasn't smiling. "That was me," Samuel said quietly. "A long time ago." I traced the edges of the photo. The boy in it carried the same shadows I felt on my skin. "No one helped me then," Samuel continued. "But I swore if I ever heard another voice like mine, I wouldn't stay silent." I looked at him differently after that. Not just as a stranger who opened a door, but as someone who had walked through the same kind of fire. "Does it ever go away?" I asked. "The pain?" He shook his head slightly. "Not all the way. But it changes. It becomes something you carry without letting it crush you. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it becomes the reason you help someone else stand." I held the photo to my chest. My heartbeat steadied. The shadows in my dream still lingered, but they weren't the whole night anymore. For the first time, I believed maybe I wasn't just surviving. Maybe I was beginning to live. The next morning arrived gray, as if the sky itself hadn't slept. I woke to the sound of rain tapping softly against the windows, a rhythm steadier than my own heartbeat. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The couch beneath me felt too soft, the blanket too warm, the air too quiet. Then I saw Samuel, already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and the memories of last night flooded back. "Morning, Lena," he said, his voice calm, as if we'd shared breakfasts 100 times before. "How'd you sleep?" I rubbed my eyes, hesitating. "Better than before," I admitted. He smiled faintly. "That's something." On the table sat a small plate with toast and a jar of jam. Not much, but the kind of food that didn't come with shouting. I sat down carefully, the chair legs squeaking against the wooden floor. He slid the plate toward me. "You don't have to eat if you don't want to," Samuel reminded me. "But it's yours if you're hungry." This time, I didn't hesitate. I spread the jam clumsily, the sweetness staining my fingers, and ate in silence. Each bite tasted less like food and more like possibility. When the rain eased, Samuel stood and pulled on his coat. "We'll need to take a walk today," he said. "There are people we should speak to. People who can make sure you're safe for more than just a night." The words made my stomach twist. Safe was a beautiful promise, but promises had been broken before. "Will Darlene come looking for me?" I asked. Samuel looked out the window, where the rain still clung to the glass like fingerprints. "Maybe. But she won't find what she's expecting." The walk to the office was quiet. The city smelled of wet asphalt and coffee drifting from corner shops. Cars splashed through puddles, umbrellas bobbed like dark flowers. I stayed close to Samuel, watching his long strides, trying to match them. We arrived at a building taller than the others, its glass doors reflecting the gray sky. Inside, the walls were painted pale yellow, the kind meant to look cheerful but instead felt tired. A woman at the front desk greeted Samuel with cautious familiarity. He explained briefly, his voice low but steady. Her eyes flicked to me, softening. "Sit tight," she told him. "Someone will be with you shortly." We waited on a bench near the wall. A child across from me, younger than I was, colored in a book with broken crayons. His mother kept whispering reassurances, though her eyes betrayed exhaustion. Samuel leaned close. "This place isn't perfect," he murmured. "But sometimes it's a start." When we were finally called into a small office, a woman with glasses and kind lines around her mouth invited us to sit. She asked me questions, my name, my age, where I lived, who took care of me. The questions felt like stepping on stones across a river, one wrong move and I'd fall. Samuel sat beside me, silent but present, his hand resting on the arm of the chair like an anchor. At one point, the woman asked, "Do you feel safe at home, Lena?" I hesitated. The word safe echoed differently in that room, like it had to meet a standard before it counted. I looked at Samuel. He gave a small nod, not telling me what to say, but reminding me I was allowed to speak. "No," I said finally, my voice trembling but clear. "I don't." The woman scribbled notes, her eyes narrowing with concern. She asked more, but each answer felt easier once the first had been spoken. When the meeting ended, she promised to begin an investigation. Promises. They still scared me. But Samuel's steady presence made them less fragile. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds thinned, letting weak sunlight fall across the wet pavement. For a moment, I let the warmth touch my face. But the calm didn't last. As we walked back towards Samuel's building, a figure appeared at the corner, hair frizzed, eyes wild, coat thrown over pajamas. "Darlene." "There you are," she shrieked, her voice cutting through the street like broken glass. People turned. My heart froze. Samuel's arm moved in front of me instinctively, like a gate. His voice, calm but sharp, cut through hers. "Stay back." "She's mine," Darlene spat. "You think you can just take her? You don't know what you're doing." I trembled, my body trying to fold into itself. Old habits, stay small, stay silent. But Samuel didn't move. He didn't shrink. "She's not yours to hurt," he said firmly. "Not anymore." The words hung in the air. A crowd was forming, curious eyes, murmurs spreading. Darlene's fury faltered under the weight of witnesses. Her mouth twisted, but her voice lost its edge. "You'll regret this," she hissed, before retreating down the street, disappearing into the noise of the city. Samuel exhaled slowly. "You're safe," he said, more to me than to himself. But as we continued walking, I realized safety wasn't just about locked doors or warm blankets. Safety was about voices that stood where yours had been silenced. And Samuel's voice had done that. That night, back at his apartment, I lay on the couch again, listening to the quiet. My chest still carried echoes of Darlene's scream, but they were weaker now, drowned out by something stronger, the memory of Samuel standing tall, refusing to let me vanish. For the first time, I believed tomorrow might actually belong to me. The days that followed blurred together, but not in the way they used to. Before, every hour had been heavy, pressing against my ribs, choking me in silence. Now, each morning carried something lighter, like a door that had finally been cracked open. Samuel kept his promise. He took me back to the office where the kind-eyed woman worked. There were meetings, questions, papers shuffled from one hand to another. Words like custody and protection floated above me, too large to hold but no longer threatening. They weren't weapons. They were shields. At night, I still dreamed of Darlene's voice, sharp as broken glass. But the dreams always shifted. Where once I was trapped in that kitchen, staring at a plate I could never finish, now I found myself in Samuel's apartment. Books stacked on the shelves, rain tapping the window, his voice steady in the next room. The nightmares didn't vanish, but they lost their teeth. One evening, Samuel sat across from me at the small wooden table, a notebook open between us. "You like to draw?" he asked. I shrugged. "I don't know. I never had paper." He pushed the notebook toward me along with a pencil. "Then see what happens." The lines that came weren't pretty. crooked houses. Stick figures with two big heads. But each mark felt like a piece of me crawling out from hiding. When I looked up, Samuel wasn't judging. He was smiling softly, as though each shaky line told him I was still here, still fighting. Days turned into weeks. Social workers visited. Neighbors who'd once ignored me now nodded when they passed Samuel on the street. Even the diner waitress began greeting me by name, sliding pancakes onto my plate like it was the most natural thing in the world. But the biggest change wasn't outside. It was inside. I began to laugh again, small at first, fragile, but real. A sound I hadn't trusted in years. I caught Samuel noticing once, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. One afternoon, as we walked through the park, I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest for days. "Why did you stay alone all this time, Samuel?" He kept his eyes on the path, his hands tucked into his coat. "Because I thought people were too heavy to carry," he admitted. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe carrying someone isn't a burden, it's what gives us strength. I thought about that long after. Maybe that's what rescue really was. Not one dramatic moment, but the quiet choice to keep showing up, to keep standing, to keep being the voice when someone else couldn't find theirs. Eventually, the courts decided I wouldn't be going back to Darlene. That chapter had closed. The day the papers were signed, Samuel let out a breath so deep it seemed he'd been holding it for years. "What happens now?" I asked. He crouched so we were eye level. "Now, Lena, now we build something new." His words weren't grand. They didn't promise perfection. But they promised tomorrow. And tomorrow was something I'd once thought I'd never see. That night, lying on the couch that had become more mine than borrowed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, I made it. The shadows were still there, but they no longer owned me. And Samuel, this stranger who had become the loudest proof that kindness still existed, was the reason. If you're listening to my story now, maybe you've felt the weight of silence too. Maybe you've known what it's like to shout enough, and believe no one would ever hear. But I'm proof that voices carry. That sometimes a single knock on a door, a single stranger's choice, can change everything. So if this story reached you, don't let it stop here. Share it, comment what it made you feel, tell someone else who might need to hear it. Because there are still children waiting for a voice like Samuel's, still shadows waiting to be broken by light. And if you want to stand with me, if you believe every story like mine deserves to be told, then subscribe to Cryspire. Here, we give life to voices the world tried to silence. Together, we make sure no child is left unheard.